My mom declared me dead, I became rich, then I crashed her party. The night I walked back into that hall, the air smelled exactly the same as the day she buried me alive: cheap perfume, fried food, and something sweet burning at the edges. Plastic tablecloths, pastel balloons, and a crooked banner over the stage. Blessed 85 years. Church ladies in floral dresses carried foil pans to the buffet. Kids chased each other between folding chairs, their laughter cutting through the low hum of gossip. Then the door creaked behind them. A breeze slipped in from the parking lot, and with it, the kind of silence you don't plan. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. A chair leg scraped. Someone sucked in a sharp breath. From the doorway, all they saw at first was a dark silhouette against the outside light. A woman in an emerald dress, hair falling loose around her shoulders, one hand resting on the frame like she'd bought the building. A man near the punch bowl froze. "Is that?" he whispered. Across the room, Marcella laughed too loud at her own story. She was in the center, of course. She always found the light. Red blazer, pearls gleaming, her hair sprayed into place like nothing in her world ever moved unless she allowed it. And that's when I told the doctor, "You don't know my mother, she's never spent a day in bed in her life." She turned to gesture at the guest of honor on the stage, but her eyes hit the doorway instead. Her sentence cut off in the middle. The microphone hummed in the space where her voice used to be. For a second, she didn't recognize me. I could see that thought pass across her face in real time. Her gaze ran from the dress to the hair to the way I was standing, and I watched the moment she slid my features over the ghost she'd invented. The color drained from her cheeks. The old women at her table followed her stare. One of them let her plastic cup slip from her fingers. Lemonade splashed onto the floor. "That's impossible," someone murmured. "They said she died." My heels clicked once, twice on the laminate as I stepped inside. The door swung shut behind me with a soft thud, shutting out the sound of passing cars, trapping us all back in the same air. I didn't hurry. I let them look. I saw it all in their faces: the neighbors who'd sent sympathy cards, the deacon who'd shaken my mother's hand at the front of the church, the cousin who'd posted some vague, tragic quote on her page like she'd lost a sister and not a phone number. Nobody had asked for a death certificate. Nobody had called the hospital to make sure. The last time most of these people heard my name, my mother was standing in this same hall, holding a tissue to her eyes, telling them her eldest daughter had been taken too soon. They brought casseroles. They hugged her at the door. They told her she was strong. Meanwhile, I was in a city 4 hours away, working night shifts and studying concrete fractures, very much alive and very deliberately forgotten. Now I was back. Breathing. Dressed like everything she'd sworn I'd never be. And I wasn't here to make peace. I was here for one girl. My eyes skipped over Marcella and landed on the corner near the cake table, where a small figure was half hidden behind a folding chair. A girl in a pale yellow dress, with a bow too tight at the back, hands clasped in front of her like she'd been warned not to wrinkle it. Haley. 10 years old, dark hair braided down her back, watching me like she'd seen my picture in a storybook and finally realized it wasn't a fairy tale. She was standing next to my younger sister, Tisa. Tisa's smile was stiff, eyes wide, the way you smile at a car you know is about to crash, but you're not the one in the driver's seat. I stepped farther into the room. Conversations died in little pockets as I passed. "Good evening," I said, my voice cutting through the hush. "Don't stop on my account. I hear we're celebrating 85 years of survival tonight." Marcella swallowed. The microphone in her hand trembled just enough for the front row to see. She clicked it off without looking, set it on the table, and smoothed the front of her blazer twice in a row, like a reflex. "Celia," she said, like my name was something sour stuck between her teeth. What are you doing here?" I smiled. I wanted to make her say my name again. Say it like it belonged to the living. "Good to see you too, Marcella," I answered. "I heard you've been mourning." A few people flinched at the use of her first name. My mother had spent years training them not to. Behind her, my grandmother shifted in her chair, peering over her glasses. Her eyes weren't as sharp as they used to be, but even she looked like she'd seen a ghost crawl back out of the ground on her birthday. In the back, someone whispered, "I thought she was dead." Didn't they say, car accident? I sent flowers, another voice hissed. I sent flowers to a funeral that didn't exist. Marcella's jaw tightened. You could see her trying to reach for a version of the story that still made her the victim. There's been a misunderstanding, she said, lifting her chin, addressing the room rather than me. Celia left. She cut contact. We thought. You told them I was gone, I said calmly, not raising my voice. Not missing. Not out of touch. Gone. I let the words sit there, heavy. One of the ushers shifted his weight, remembering the Sunday she'd stood up front with a framed photo of me and wet eyes, mumbling something about a gas leak, a late-night drive, a call no mother should ever have to get. She had never been specific. That was the clever thing. Tragedy without details. Enough for sympathy. Not enough for questions. Now those missing details were staring them in the face. Most people don't know what it's like to attend your own wake. To walk into a room full of people who cried over your invented grave and watch their faces as they realize you're still breathing. Some of you do. Some of you know exactly what this feels like, being erased from your own family story like you were a mistake they could just edit out. Like you were a messy paragraph they crossed out with a black pen and never expected to see again. If that already tugged at something in your chest, stay with this one. Because the worst part isn't that they declared me dead. It's what they did with the life I left behind. I took another step forward. The hall's fluorescent lights caught on the stones at my wrist, the simple gold at my throat. I knew what I looked like to them. The girl who had been good at math and too quiet, suddenly walking back in like the ending of a movie Marcella hadn't watched all the way through. You can relax, I said. I didn't come to ruin your party. I let my eyes travel slowly over the decorations, the cake with its meticulous frosting roses, the table of gifts. My gaze landed back on Haley. I came for her. Haley's fingers tightened around the paper plate she was holding. A smear of icing sat untouched at the edge. She doesn't know you, Marcella snapped, the calm cracking. You have no right to show up here and… Whose fault is that? I tilted my head. The woman who left, or the woman who told everyone she died? A ripple went through the room. People who had been avoiding looking at me now couldn't look away. Tisa shifted so she was slightly in front of her daughter, instinctive, protective. But she didn't move Haley away. That was new. The Tisa I remembered at 13 had been too afraid to step between anyone and Marcella. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my voice stayed steady. This wasn't a yelling match. If I started yelling, they could say I was hysterical, unstable, exactly the kind of person you might need to lie about. I wasn't here to prove I was alive. I was here to prove they didn't own the future. My gaze hooked on Haley again. The yellow dress. The neat braids. The way she kept her shoulders slightly rounded, making herself smaller so she wouldn't take up too much space near the grown-ups. I recognized that posture. I had invented that posture. Bring the plates over here, sweetheart, one of the church ladies called to her, as if to break the tension. You're such a good little helper. Haley flinched and obeyed, carrying 2 stacked plates with both hands. As she reached the table near the stage, Marcella put a hand on her shoulder. This is our little helper, she told the guests closest to her, her voice smoothing as she found familiar territory. She's always right by our side. She'll take care of us when we're old, won't you, Haley? Haley's eyes flickered up to her grandmother, then across the room to me. She nodded automatically. Yes, Nana. They laughed softly, indulgent. Bless her heart. Girls like that are rare these days. I felt something hot crawl up my spine. They had said those exact words about me once. Same spotlight, same casual tone, like it was a compliment to hand a child a lifetime of unpaid labor and call it destiny. She'll take care of us when we're old. She'll stay. She won't leave. The first time they said it about me, I believed them. I thought it was love. I thought being needed meant being wanted. I know better now. The air in the hall felt suddenly thin. The chatter at the edges started to pick back up, but my focus narrowed to the weight of Marcella's hand on Haley's shoulder, the way the girl didn't pull away. This wasn't just revenge anymore. Standing there, watching that small body be fitted for the same invisible harness they'd strapped on me, something inside me locked into place. They had already written my ending once. I'd torn it up and taped together a different one. I was not going to stand there and watch them press the same broken script onto her. The last time they said that about a girl in this room, she ended up on a bus at 4 in the morning with $40 from a father who couldn't save her. Tonight, they were going to hear the rest of that story. Underscore, 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 underscore. The first time I held my future in my hands, it came in a thin white envelope that didn't look like it could change anything. I was 17, standing over the kitchen sink with my fingers still wet from dishwater when I slid my thumb under the flap. The paper inside was heavy, official, the kind of thing nobody in this house ever got except for bills and church letters. Dear Celia North. I didn't even make it all the way through the first paragraph before my chest started to burn. Full scholarship. Top engineering program. Housing covered. A way out that didn't require anyone's permission. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped it into the sink. I dried it carefully on a clean towel and folded it back into the envelope like it was something alive. For the rest of the day, I kept it tucked under my shirt, the edge scraping my skin every time I bent over to pick up after someone. Everywhere I walked, the house felt smaller. My grandmother's TV hummed in the living room. Tisa called from her bedroom for help with a zipper. Marcella's voice floated down the hallway as she argued with a customer on the phone about a missing cake order. The walls had grooves where furniture had sat in the same place for 20 years. You grow up thinking there's only one road, school, maybe a job at the diner, taking care of the old ones until it's your turn to sit in the chair by the window and watch someone else wash the dishes. That letter said otherwise. I hid it in the bottom of my laundry basket, under a pile of folded shirts. I knew they'd go through my phone. I knew they'd listen to my conversations through the vents. I didn't think they'd search a stack of clean clothes. That was my first mistake. The second was believing I had more time. The next afternoon, I came home from school and knew from the air in the hallway that something had shifted. The house was too quiet. No TV. No clatter of pans. Just the faint tick of the clock in the kitchen. I walked in and saw Marcella at the table with the envelope in front of her. The flap was ripped open, jagged. The letter lay beside it, unfolded, its neat black type a stranger in this room full of handwritten grocery lists and scribbled recipes. She didn't say, hello. Sit, she said. I sat. She picked up the letter between two fingers like she was holding a spider. So, her voice was almost soft, which was how I knew I was in real trouble. You were going to leave. There are 1,000 ways to say yes without using the word. I went with silence. My throat had gone dry. You were going to run off to some city, she continued, eyes still on the page, and leave your grandmother without anyone to take her to the doctor. Leave your sister without anyone to watch her child when she has one. Leave me with all of this on my own. I forced my mouth to work. I was going to study. It's a scholarship. They pay for everything. Her eyes finally lifted to mine. You think that matters? She stood up so slowly the chair barely made a sound. You think there's some world where you get to go off and be special, she said, gesturing with the letter toward the window, and the rest of us just sit here and clap for you? It's not like that, I whispered. I could help more if I had a real job. If I... Who? She cut in, each word clipped. Do you think is going to wipe your grandmother's mouth when she can't swallow? The kitchen seemed to shrink around us. The smell of fried onions clung to the curtains. A fly buzzed somewhere near the ceiling, trapped. She stepped closer, the letter still in her hand. You think you're too good for this family now? She asked. I shook my head. No. I got in. They chose me. I didn't ask you because I knew you'd say. Her palm cracked across my cheek before I could finish. Not hard enough to knock me back. Hard enough to make my eyes water and my ears ring. Don't you dare blame me for this, she said quietly. Don't you dare make me the villain in whatever story you've been telling yourself, Celia. My name came out like a slur. She looked back down at the letter. For a heartbeat, I thought, stupidly, that maybe she'd fold it up. Maybe we'd have a conversation about logistics, about how it would work, about how often I could come back. Instead, she held it up between us and, without breaking eye contact, tore it in half. The sound was small. It still sliced something open inside my chest. She tore it again. And again. Long strips, then smaller ones, until the lines of text were broken into nonsense. Paper snowed down onto the table, onto the floor. "There," she said, breathing just a little harder now. "Problem solved." She brushed past me, the smell of fabric softener and bakery sugar clinging to her sweater. "You're staying," she said over her shoulder. "You have responsibilities. You think some school is going to love you the way we do? You think they'll be there when you're sick?" The front door opened and closed. Tisa's laughter floated in from the yard. Somewhere down the hall, my grandmother called my mother's name, a thin, reedy sound. I stared at the pile of shredded future at my feet. The logical thing would have been to throw it all away, scrape it into the trash can, and pretend it had never come. Instead, I dropped to my knees. The linoleum was cold through my jeans. My fingers trembled as I gathered the pieces, flipping them over to find lines of text, numbers, my own name cut into thirds. I found the crest first, broken into 3 crooked arcs. Then the line with full scholarship, split right down the middle. I pressed the halves together like I could force them to fuse by will alone. The tape was in the junk drawer by the stove. I knew where it was because I'd used it 100 times to fix things we didn't have money to replace: torn book covers, broken curtain rods, cracked picture frames. This was just one more thing. I laid the fragments out on the floor in front of me, arranging them like a puzzle. The edges didn't fit perfectly anymore. Some slivers were missing, swept under the fridge, or stuck to the bottom of Marcella's shoe. Still, the words were there. "Dear Celia, pleased to offer full scholarship, housing tuition." The tape hissed as I pulled it from the roll. I smoothed strip after strip over the broken lines, little transparent bridges holding my future together. By the time I finished, the letter looked like a fracture map. Clear veins ran across the white paper, holding it in one piece. The creases would never go away. But if you squinted, if you leaned in close, you could still read what mattered. If a piece of paper could survive being torn apart, so could I. I folded it along the original crease, careful not to tear the tape, and slid it into my school binder between 2 notebooks. It crackled when it closed, a faint reminder pressed against algebra problems and physics notes. The next morning, Marcella wore black to church. She didn't tell me why. She didn't have to. She walked ahead of us down the aisle, shoulders squared, hand pressed to her chest. People reached out to touch her arm, their faces puzzled, then horrified as she whispered something to each one. I stayed near the back, tucked into the end of a pew, watching from the shadows. My grandmother sat near the front, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Tisa twisted her hands in her lap, glancing back at me every few seconds like she wasn't sure where she was supposed to be. "I'm so sorry," the pastor said at the end of the service, his voice soft and grave. "Our hearts are with Marcella and her family during this unimaginable loss. No mother should have to bury her child." Heads bowed, hands folded. People sniffled quietly. Behind my closed eyelids, my hands were clenched so tight my nails bit into my palms. She hadn't said how I died. She didn't need to. The imagination of a small town will do the rest. Car accident. Late night drive. Wrong place, wrong time. Something tragic, something neat. They hugged her on the way out. They told her she was strong. They brought casseroles that afternoon and filled our refrigerator so full we didn't have room for our own food. Nobody came down the hallway to see if I was in my room. Nobody knocked. They just talked a little quieter when they passed my door. I learned that day how easy it is to erase a person when the whole room agrees not to see her. If you've ever watched people cry over the version of you they prefer while you're standing 10 feet away, breathing, if you've ever listened to someone rewrite your existence in past tense because it makes their story cleaner, you already understand the kind of funeral I was given. And if you've ever had to walk away from people who swore they loved you, not because you stopped loving them, but because staying would have killed you, you are not the only one. If that's you, tell me how old you were when you realized you would have to leave to live. Drop it in the comments. You'd be shocked how many of you share the same number. The night I finally left, the house smelled like bleach and birthday cake. It was 3 in the morning. The cheap alarm clock on my nightstand glowed red in the dark. I had packed my life into a single duffel bag, 2 pairs of jeans, 3 shirts, my lab goggles, the taped letter, $73 in tip money folded into a sock. I opened my bedroom door slowly, wincing at every creak of the old wood. The hallway was a river of shadows. My grandmother's door was half open. Her snores rolled softly into the hall. Tisa's room at the end was closed, a thin strip of light from the street cutting under it. I walked there on bare feet, the cold floorboard grounding me. I slid a folded note under her door. The words on it were simple: I love you. This is not your fault. I'll write when I can. If I stayed long enough to see her reaction, I wouldn't leave. The garage smelled like motor oil and damp cardboard. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, turned off. The only light came from the little window above the workbench, a dim suggestion of the moon. I didn't expect anyone to be there. But in the shadows, I saw the red tip of a cigarette flare, then dim. Thought I heard you, Elias said quietly. He was sitting on an overturned bucket next to the car, shoulders hunched, jacket still on like he'd never really decided whether he was going out or staying in. My heart slammed against my ribs. The excuses crowded my tongue. I was just getting something. I couldn't sleep. I have to go, was what came out instead. His eyes traveled from my face to the duffel bag, then back. He didn't ask why. Fathers in this house didn't get to ask why. They got to fix sinks and mow lawns and disappear into themselves when the voices got too loud. Come here, he said, standing up slow, joints creaking. He opened his wallet and pulled out everything inside. It wasn't much, 2 20s, a 10, 3 crumpled singles. $83. He pressed the bills into my hand and closed my fingers around them. It's not enough, I whispered. I know, he said. His voice scratched at the edges, tired. It's what I have. He didn't say he was proud of me. He didn't say he was sorry. Those words lived in a part of him that had been boarded up a long time ago. Instead, he walked to the wall and took down the spare car keys. He slipped them off the hook and into my palm, over the money. I'll drive you to the bus, he murmured. I'll be back before she wakes up. For a second, I saw something like fear flicker in his eyes, not of Marcella, not exactly, but of standing between her and what she believed was hers. We didn't turn on the garage light. He opened the door manually, the metal groaning, and we rolled out into the cold without the engine ever waking the house. The roads were empty. The dashboard clock ticked over to 4:11 a.m. Streetlights rushed past in streaks of orange, then black, then orange again. You don't have to do this, he said, finally, as we pulled up to the bus station. It came out weak, like he knew it was more habit than real objection. I do, I replied. He nodded once, eyes on the cracked windshield. At the curb, he stopped the car but didn't shut off the engine. The bus idled a few meters away, lights too bright in the dark. I reached for the door handle. His hand shot out, landing clumsily on my wrist. I should have stopped her, he said, the words dragged up from somewhere deep. I should have told them you weren't, he swallowed. I should have been louder. I looked at him, really looked at him, the lines at the corners of his eyes, the way his shoulders curved inward like someone had hooked their fingers into them years ago and never let go. You were the only one who put money in my hand, I said softly. That's louder than you think. I got out before either of us could cry. The bus driver took my ticket without a word. I found a seat by the window, pressed my forehead to the glass, and watched my father's car get smaller. In the seat next to me, the taped letter lay on my lap. The tape caught the light, tiny silver scars across white. As the bus pulled away from the curb, I heard Marcella's voice in my head, sharp as broken glass. Who do you think you are? I didn't have an answer yet. Only this: whoever I was going to become, I couldn't become her. The town fell away behind us, streetlights, the church steeple, the grocery store, the bakery where Marcella spent her days handing frosted dreams to other people's children. The highway unspooled ahead, long and dark and mercifully empty. That was the point of no return. Years later, when people see the polished version of your life, they like to imagine there was some grand turning point. A montage of hustle set to upbeat music. One big break, and then everything falls into place. The truth is uglier and slower. My first apartment in the city was a basement with a window that stared into someone's ankles. The pipes in the bathroom rattled like they were complaining. I slept on a secondhand mattress that smelled faintly of someone else's cologne. I went to class in the mornings, lab in the afternoons, diner in the evenings. My hands always smelled like a different part of my day: metal and dust, coffee and grease, antiseptic and cheap soap. On nights I didn't have money for the bus, I walked home with my backpack digging into my shoulders, the taped letter folded in the pocket closest to my chest. In lab, I fell in love with failure. Cracked beams, collapsed bridges, grainy videos of buildings buckling in on themselves. While everyone else rushed to fix things, I leaned in close to the fractures, tracing lines with my eyes, asking quietly, "Where did you start?" One professor noticed. He was older, with tired eyes and a mug that always smelled like the strongest coffee in the room. "You keep staring at the breaks," he said once, standing behind me as I paused a simulation. "Most people only want to see what it looks like when it's whole." "It tells you more when it's broken," I answered. He hummed. "You ever thought about structural health monitoring?" I shook my head. He pushed a brochure across the table. Wireless sensors. Predictive maintenance. Invisible corrosion tracked before the concrete crumbles. They hide the damage inside the beams, he said. We find it before it kills anyone. Something in me clicked. Families had their own kind of rebar, their own hidden rust growing under smiling photos and holiday cards. I knew that kind of damage better than anyone. From there, my path branched into places that 17-year-old me wouldn't even have known how to imagine. The first win was small, a co-authored paper that only a handful of specialists would ever read. The second was bigger, a prototype that actually worked on a bridge outside the city, catching a weakness before a crack spidered across the concrete. The startup came later, in a cramped office with bad coffee and good ideas. There were 4 of us at the beginning, cramped around a single table: 2 engineers, 1 data scientist, 1 person who knew how to talk to investors without scaring them. They called our tech a game changer in safety. They called our sensors the difference between a headline and a miracle. I called it survival. The first time a check with more zeros than I'd ever seen in my life landed in my account, I sat on my kitchen floor and stared at my online banking app until the numbers blurred. I didn't buy a car. I didn't buy a house. I bought quiet. The new apartment was on the 12th floor of a building with a security desk and an elevator that didn't groan. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A kitchen that didn't smell like anyone's history but mine. Every object there was chosen. The couch. The dishes. The plants along the window that I watered on schedule. No clutter. No mystery items that belonged to someone else. It was a life designed like a system, predictable, controlled, safe. No one yelled. No one slammed doors. No one came into my room without knocking, because there was no one else with a key. Of course, there was a cost. You can't cut yourself off from one thing without bleeding somewhere else. I knew everybody's coffee order at the office and nobody's middle name. I had colleagues, not friends. I had partners, not lovers. I had a calendar full of meetings and flights, and not a single recurring event that said, "Call home." Home was just a word for a place where people thought I was buried. The call that proved that came on a Tuesday. I was in the lab, standing over a slab of concrete threaded with sensors, watching data scroll in green lines across a screen. The building hummed with fluorescent lights and the distant grind of an elevator. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. Local area code from back home. For a second, my thumb hovered over ignore. Old habits. If it was important, they'd leave a voicemail. Then I answered. "Hello." There was a breath on the other end, rough and shallow. "Celia," a man's voice said. Is this still your number?" It had been years since I'd heard my name in that tone. I had to sit down on the nearest stool, my knees suddenly unsure. "Elias?" I asked, the words strange in my mouth. I hadn't called him Dad out loud in a long time. He cleared his throat. "Yeah, it's me." The background noise on his end sounded like our old kitchen, the clink of a spoon against a mug, the drone of the TV in the other room, my grandmother's voice faintly complaining about a commercial. "I didn't know if this would still work," he said. "I found it on a piece of paper. In the recipe box." The recipe box. The one that lived on top of the fridge under a thin film of flour. My chest tightened. "Why are you calling?" He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped, like he was half afraid Marcella could hear him through the phone. "I heard something," he said. "About you." I almost laughed. "What, that I died?" He inhaled sharply. You know about that." "I heard it from a stranger at the bus station," I said. "Back when it was fresh." She offered me a tissue. A small, strangled sound caught in his throat. "I didn't." "I never said it," he rushed. "That was all her." "I didn't correct her either, but I never." There it was. The confession between sins of commission and omission. "I figured," I said. Silence stretched between us, long and taut. I could have hung up. I thought about it. Instead, he filled it. "She tells people you're gone," he said. "Like you were taken. Says it's too painful to talk about." They all pat her hand. I could picture it perfectly. The tilt of her head. The rehearsed quiver in her voice. The way she'd soak up sympathy like sunlight. "I didn't call you for that," Elias added quickly. "I called because I heard them say something the other night, and it sounded exactly like how they used to talk about you." My back straightened. "About who?" I asked, though I already knew. "About Haley," he said. "About Tisa's girl." He swallowed noisily, like the words hurt going down. They were at the table. Your mother, your grandmother, and Carol. They had her standing there in that little dress, passing out napkins, and they kept saying, "She's our little helper. She's going to stay close. She'll look after us when we're old." The lab felt suddenly too bright. The hum of the equipment too loud. "I know that's what family is supposed to do," he continued, voice shaking. "Help. Take care." But it sounded wrong. It sounded like they'd already decided for her. Like they'd already put that weight on her shoulders and figured she'd never shrug it off. A memory hit me so hard, I had to close my eyes, the feel of a stack of dirty plates cutting into my fingers, the same words in the same room, grown UPS laughing like it was cute, like sentencing a child to a life of service was a joke. I opened my eyes and stared at the data on the screen, green lines blurring into each other. "Girls like us don't need all that education nonsense," I heard Marcella's voice say in my mind, echoing something Elias must have overheard. "They belong at home." A taste like metal filled my mouth. "She's 10, Elias whispered. "They're already talking about how she doesn't need to go far. How she shouldn't get ideas. And I thought of you. Of the letter. Of that night in the garage." He went quiet again, and when he spoke, the words came out small. "I couldn't help you then," he said. "Not really. I gave you $83 and a ride and then let them bury you on Sundays. I don't want to stand back and watch them do it to her too." The edges of my vision prickled. I pressed my thumb hard into the muscle of my thigh, grounding myself in the present. There are moments when your life stops being just your own, whether you want it to or not. Up until that phone call, my story had been a straight line: escape, survive, build, forget. I had built sensors that could detect invisible rot in concrete. I knew how to see cracks before they formed. I could model stress points, predict failure. I had never applied that same precision to my own family. Until now. The pattern was clear. The load was shifting from one generation to the next. The same phrases. The same jokes. The same casual promises of a future that looked like a cage. If I walked away again, I wasn't just abandoning the people who hurt me. I was abandoning the girl who still had time to learn that love and ownership were not the same thing. "I hear you," I said finally. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, level, almost clinical. Like I was describing a structure, not a child. "What are you going to do?" Elias asked. I looked at the sensor readouts, at the neat lines predicting how and when a beam would fail under pressure if nothing changed. "I'm going to do what I do best," I said. "I'm going to find the weak point in the system. And then I'm going to make sure it can't collapse on her." That was the night I stopped thinking of my success as just my own. The money sitting in my account wasn't just proof I'd escaped. It was leverage. And in the hands of someone who had once been declared dead and learned how to come back anyway, leverage is a very sharp tool. ________. The folder with the party's programs and donation envelopes was sitting on the table when I reached into my bag. I didn't pull out a weapon. I pulled out a manila envelope. The room was still vibrating from what I'd just said about being dead and walking back in anyway. Some people couldn't meet my eyes. Others couldn't stop staring. Marcella stood stiff beside the cake, fingers white around the edge of the tablecloth, like she could keep the whole night from sliding off if she just held on tight enough. I didn't look at her. I walked past her, past the pastor who suddenly found something fascinating about the floor, and stopped in front of Tisa and Haley. Up close, I could see the faint smear of pink frosting on Haley's wrist. A candle flame reflected in her eyes. "Hi," I said softly. She flinched like the word might bite. Tisa shifted, putting a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Haley, this is," she faltered. No one had given her the script for this moment. "This is your Aunt Celia." Aunt. Not ghost. Not cautionary tale. Not missing person. I met Haley's gaze. "You look a lot like your mom at your age," I said. "Except you already stand taller than I did." A tiny smile tugged at the corner of her mouth before she remembered she wasn't supposed to like me and smoothed it away. I set the manila envelope down on the nearest cleared space. The thud it made was quiet but solid. The kind of sound paper makes when it matters. "This," I said, my hand resting on top of it, "is for her." Tisa frowned. "What is it?" "An education trust," I said. "Her name on it. Her future in it. Money that doesn't belong to this hall, this family, or any story someone else writes." The words hung there. Marcella barked out a laugh, a brittle sound. "Oh, please," she said. "You disappear for years. You show up on my mother's birthday with your city clothes and your attitude, and now you're throwing money around? You think you can buy your way back into this family?" I didn't look at her. "It's not about getting back into anything," I said, eyes on Tisa. "It's about giving her a way out if she ever wants one." Tisa's fingers tightened on Haley's shoulder. "What's the catch?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the chatter that had started up around us. "Nothing like this comes without one." "There doesn't have to be a catch," I started. It's tuition. Books. Housing. Any program she gets into anywhere, she doesn't have to ask anyone here how to pay for it. She doesn't have to stay because there's no money. She doesn't have to trade her life for your comfort." The old language rose in my mouth without my permission. "She won't have to waste years in some dead-end job. She won't have to." I caught myself. I heard the words the way somebody else would hear them. "She won't have to. She won't have to." A list of musts written in reverse. "And if she doesn't want that?" Tisa pressed. "What happens if she doesn't want what you want for her? What if she wants, I don't know, art school? Or a bakery? Or to stay close but on her own terms? We can structure the funds so she has to meet certain standards," I said too fast. "Grades above AC. No dropping out. No." I heard it. The musts. The conditions. The invisible leash. My heart misfired in my chest. Heat crawled up my neck. Tisa's expression shifted. It wasn't anger. It was something worse, recognition. "Listen to yourself," she said quietly. "You sound just like her. Just with a nicer dress and a better lawyer." The words slid in under my ribs, sharp and clean. For a second, the hall fell away. The chatter, the clattering dishes, the murmur of hymns through the thin walls from the main sanctuary, all of it blurred. All I could see was Haley at 16, 20, 30, sitting across from someone, saying, "My grandmother wanted me to stay and take care of her. My aunt wanted me to leave and take her money. None of them ever asked me what I wanted. They just decided." I saw her signing forms she didn't fully understand because they were for her own good. I saw her grinding herself into dust to keep a scholarship she never chose. I saw her waking up at 35 realizing she'd spent her 20s living out someone else's fear. My fear. My conditions. My chains. The room tilted. For a heartbeat, I tasted metal again, the same taste from when Marcella tore my letter. Shame has its own flavor. The part of me that had survived this long by clinging to control panicked. "If you loosen your grip," it whispered, "they'll take her. They'll win. You beat them by being stronger, stricter, sharper. If you don't set rules, she'll fall. She'll stay." But another voice slipped in, quieter and older than all of this. "If you put your hands around her life and squeeze, what's the difference between you and the woman who ripped your future up on a kitchen floor?" My pulse thudded in my ears. I could feel every eye in the room on us, but for once, I didn't care. I cared about one girl in a yellow dress looking back and forth between the women who both claimed to love her and seeing nothing but cages. I took a breath that hurt on the way in. "You're right," I said to Tisa. The words tasted like gravel. "You're right to ask." She blinked, surprised. Marcella scoffed. "Oh, now she's trying to sound reasonable." "This is not a contract for obedience," I said, louder, so the whole table could hear. My hand was still on the envelope. I forced myself to relax my fingers. "It's a door. That's all. Haley gets to choose where it leads." I turned to Haley. "You hear me?" I asked. "It's not a bribe. It's not a leash. It's a key. If you ever want to use it. If you don't, it sits there. It's yours either way." Her eyes were huge. No one had spoken to her like that all night, like she was a person in the room, not a prop. Tisa frowned. "So, no punishment? If she doesn't go to some fancy school you picked? If she changes her mind?" "No punishment," I said. "No silent treatment. No, after all I did for you speeches. The only thing I care about is that she's not being hurt or lied to. She can use it for engineering, art, medical school, writing books about how messed up we all are." A nervous laugh rippled through a few relatives nearby. The tension eased half an inch. "Or not at all," I finished. "But she should have that choice." "We didn't." Marcella's mouth twisted. "You're dressing it up," she snapped. "You always did like to sound clever." "It's still bribery. You're still trying to turn her against her family. Offering someone a way to stand on their own is not the same as turning them against you," I said. "If being free means she can't love you, that says more about what you call love than it does about the money." The pastor made a small noise in his throat and looked away. Elias, who had been silent by the punch bowl, cleared his throat. "She's offering our granddaughter something we never had," he said. His voice shook, but he kept going. "A choice." The room seemed to reorient around that sentence. Some people shifted their weight, uncomfortable. Others nodded just a fraction. Marcella rounded on him. "You're going to stand there and let her insult us in front of everyone? After what she did? After she ran off and after you buried her?" He cut in quietly. It was the first time he had ever contradicted her in public that I'd seen. He didn't raise his voice. He just let the truth sit there, gentle and heavy. She stared at him like he'd slapped her. "You told them she was dead," he continued. "You told me she'd be back in a week. Then you told them she was gone. You gotta have it both ways. Maybe it's time somebody else gets a say." He fell silent, but the echo of his words moved through the crowd like a draft under a door. I slid the envelope closer to Tisa. "You don't have to decide in front of her," I said quietly. "You can read it at home. Talk to whoever you need to talk to. Call me with questions. Tear it up if you want. I won't take it personally. I already lived that story once." A few people winced. Tisa looked down at the envelope like it might explode. "I know what it's like," I added, "to have everyone tell you what you owe them. What staying proves. What leaving says about you. I'm not here to tell you what kind of mother you should be, Tez. I'm just here to say this. If you want your daughter to have options, I can help with that. If you don't, I'll walk out of here and never bother you again." Haley was staring at the envelope now, hands clenched on the edge of the table. "What if?" Her voice was tiny. She swallowed and tried again. "What if I don't know what I want yet?" My chest ached. "That's the point," I said. "You're not supposed to know at 10. Or at 20. Or sometimes even at 30. That's why you don't let someone else decide for you when you're too young to see the whole map." My eyes flicked to Marcella, then back to Haley. "This is just something that sits there and waits until you're ready," I said. "That's all." The adults around us went strangely quiet. It's hard to argue with someone talking softly to a child who isn't crying. Marcella folded her arms. "You take that money," she told Tisa, "and you're telling this whole room you agree with the way she left. With what she did. You're spitting on everything we've done for you. The old script. Loyalty measured in obedience." Tisa's jaw tightened. I could see the battle behind her eyes, the fear of being cut off, the memory of the note I'd slid under her door, the years of being told a good daughter bends. Her hand moved, almost on its own. She picked up the pen lying next to the guest book. Her fingers hovered over the line on the first page of the trust summary where her name waited. My heartbeat tripped. She looked at me, then at Haley, then at Marcella, whose face had hardened into something sharp and brittle. "How long have you been planning this?" Tisa asked. "Since the second I heard them say she was our little helper," I said. "Since I realized they were about to wrap the same leash around her throat they wrapped around mine." Tisa exhaled, a tremor running through her. "You're both going to regret this," Marcella hissed. "When she comes crying back. When she fails. When—" "That's enough," my grandmother's voice rasped from her chair. It was the first thing she'd said all night that wasn't about cake or gifts. Everyone turned. She was looking at me, and for the first time since I'd walked in, I saw something in her expression that wasn't just confusion. It might have been shame. Or maybe just tiredness. "You're not the only one who got things wrong," she said to Marcella, words slow and careful. "We all did. Maybe let the child see if there's another way." The room held its breath. Tisa set the tip of the pen to the paper. Her signature looked small and shaky next to the neat legal print, but it was there. Permanent. Ink soaking into fibers. With that one motion, she moved her daughter's future onto a track no one in this family had ever walked. Marcella's face went slack. For a second, she looked almost lost, like someone had taken the script out of her hands and she didn't know her next line. Images flashed in my mind, my taped letter on the floor, the bus station, my lab, the spreadsheet where my net worth sat like a quiet weapon. All of it had been leading to this small, unspectacular moment. No dramatic music. No thunderclap. Just a pen scratching on paper and the sound of a chain slipping off a hook. You could feel it, even if you didn't have words for it, the shift. Education. Money. Choices. They no longer had to pass through Marcella's hands. For the first time in the history of this family, a girl's future could bypass the matriarchal tollbooth. That was the real collapse. Not mine. Hers. Underscore. Marcella didn't explode right away. For a moment after the pen lifted from the paper, she just stood there, fingers still gripping the back of a chair, eyes fixed on Tisa's signature like she could erase it by staring hard enough. Then she moved. She pushed through the crowd toward the side door, muttering something about needing air, about ungrateful children and ruined nights. Her heels struck the floor too loud, too fast. An aunt hurried after her, murmuring soft words, trying to gather the pieces of the performance. The room split itself. Some of the older relatives suddenly found the dessert table fascinating. Others watched me with a kind of cautious curiosity, as if I might vanish if they blinked. A few gave me small, quick nods, the kind you give someone across a room when you're not brave enough to walk over, but you want them to know you saw what they did. I didn't chase Marcella. I had spent enough of my life chasing her approval, her explanations, her half-apologies. Tonight wasn't about her. It was about the girl still holding the edge of the table, eyes huge. "Do you want to get some air?" I asked Haley. Her fingers flexed, leaving little crescent moons in the white plastic. Tisa hesitated, then nodded. "Go ahead," she said, smoothing her daughter's braid with a shaky hand. I'll be right out." The hall door let out a soft groan as we stepped outside. The parking lot was cooler than the room, breathable. The night hummed with crickets and the distant sound of tires on the main road. Overhead, the cheap string of party lights cast a warm halo over the church steps. Haley sat down on the low concrete wall that edged the flower beds, legs swinging. Her shiny shoes knocked lightly against the brick. For the first time all night, nobody was watching us. She kept her eyes on her feet when she spoke. "I was scared when you walked in," she said. Everyone looked like they saw a ghost. I leaned against the railing, keeping a little distance so she didn't feel crowded. "I know," I said. It felt that way from my side, too. She stole a quick glance at me. They told me something happened to you," she said. "That you left and never came back. That you didn't want us anymore." The words dropped between us like stones. "Is that what you believed?" I asked gently. She shrugged, shoulders jerking. "I didn't know what to believe. Nana never talks about you. Mom doesn't either. When I asked too many questions, they just changed the subject. Or said you were gone." I watched her pick at a loose thread on her dress. "Did you leave because you didn't love them?" she asked. "Or because they didn't love you?" There was no easy version of the truth. Just different angles that hurt in different ways. I left, I said slowly, because the way they loved me was going to crush me if I stayed. Because they wanted my whole life to fit inside this town and inside their expectations. And I wanted more. Not because I hated them. Because I didn't want to disappear. She frowned. Disappear. Into taking care of everyone else, I said. Into being the helper and nothing else. Into a version of myself that never got to ask what she wanted, only what everyone else needed. She nodded, the words sinking in somewhere she maybe didn't have names for yet. Did you really die? She asked, almost whispering. A laugh escaped me, soft and a little bitter. No, I said. But the person they thought I was? The girl who would stay no matter what, who would never walk out even if it hurt. She did. We sat with that for a moment. The night smelled like cut grass and exhaust. Inside, someone had started the music again, a muffled beat leaking through the walls. They said you were selfish, Haley admitted, cheeks flushing. They said you only cared about yourself. That's what people say when they're used to you putting them first and you stop, I said. Sometimes saying no sounds like selfishness to people who've only ever heard yes. She went quiet. What about what they did? She asked. Telling everyone you died. There it was. The wound we'd all been circling. That was their choice, I said. It made their lives easier to pretend I was gone instead of admitting I left on purpose. It got them sympathy. It let them keep control of the story. I met her eyes so she could see I meant this. That lie is on them, I said. Not on me. Not on you. She swallowed. Was it true? What you said in there? About the letter. About them tearing it. Yes, I said. All of it. She watched me for a long second, then looked down, kicking her heels together lightly. I have dreams sometimes, she said. About walking out. Going somewhere else. Doing something big. And then I feel bad because it feels like I'm abandoning everyone. A familiar ache pressed against my ribs. That feeling, I said, isn't proof that you're wrong. It's proof that you've been taught your value comes from staying small and close. It's what they taught me. I'm not here to tell you what to do, Haley. I'm here to make sure, if you want to go, the only thing you have to fight is your fear, not your bank account. She nodded slowly. Will Nana hate me if I leave? She asked. She might, I said honestly. Or she might tell herself a story about why you did it that makes her feel better. People do that. But whatever she feels doesn't change whether you deserve a life that fits you. She was quiet for a long time. Are you mad at them? She asked finally. Like, all the time? I thought about that, about the years I'd spent grinding my teeth in my sleep, about the fantasies of coming back with just anger and nothing else. I said. For a long time, anger was the only thing that kept me moving forward. But when I started planning this, I nodded toward the hall, toward the manila envelope inside. I realized something that scared me more than their anger. What? She whispered. That if I wasn't careful, I was going to end up controlling you the way they tried to control me, I said. Just from the other direction. Still deciding. Still insisting I knew what was best, just with better grammar and more money. Her brow furrowed, absorbing that. I don't want that, I said, more to myself than to her. I want you to grow up and be able to say, I chose this, not someone else chose for me again. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Thank you, she said. For what? I asked. For not making me pick tonight, she said. For not making me choose between you and them. That hit deeper than any insult ever had. You don't owe me that, I said. You don't owe anyone that. The hall door opened with a squeak. Tisa stepped out, arms wrapped around herself against the cooler air. Her eyes were red, but there was a strange steadiness in her shoulders. Everything okay out here? She asked. Haley nodded. We're talking. Tisa looked between us, then at me. We should get going, she said. They'll be talking in there. They were always going to talk, I said. Let them. We walked to the parking lot together, the three of us. For once, I wasn't trailing behind, carrying bags. I walked alongside them, hands empty, the night open in front of us like a road. Several years passed before the next envelope arrived. By then, the sharp edges of that night had smoothed into something else. Not forgiveness, exactly. But distance. Life in the city had changed in small, important ways. The apartment was the same, but there were new fingerprints on the glasses in my cupboard sometimes. A mug a friend had left. A sweater slung over the back of a chair that wasn't mine. There was a regular Thursday therapy appointment on my calendar, a name in my phone I could call at midnight without rehearsing my opening sentence. Work had grown too. The company had offices in places I'd only seen on maps before. Bridges I'd never walk on were safer because of lines of code I'd written. Sometimes, standing in a glass-walled conference room, talking about load distribution and predictive maintenance, I'd have a flash of myself at 16, hands wet from dishwater, thinking the world ended at the county line. That girl would not have believed this was her life. One rainy afternoon, the building's doorman handed me a small stack of mail. Bills. A glossy flyer. A plain envelope with my name written in round, familiar handwriting that hadn't existed when I left home. I froze. "Everything okay, Ms. North?" he asked. "Yeah," I said automatically. "Just old ghosts." Upstairs, I set the other envelopes on the counter and took the plain one to the table. The paper was thick, like the sender had splurged on stationery. My name was written in ink, the letters pressed a little too hard, like whoever wrote them was worried they wouldn't be real if they didn't press down. My hands shook in a way I hadn't felt since the first letter all those years ago as I slid my finger under the flap. Inside were two things. The first was a crisp acceptance letter, the logo of a university or conservatory at the top. The details blurred for a second as my eyes welled. "Dear Haley North. Scholarship offer. Program details." A campus in a city far from the hall where she'd handed out napkins in a yellow dress. The second item was smaller. Older. I pulled it out and felt my breath catch. It was my letter. Not a perfect copy. The paper was softened at the edges, creased in new places, the tape yellowed with age. The crest was still broken into 3 mismatched curves. My name still cut through the middle. Someone had kept it. Through moves, through fights, through years of pretending I wasn't real, someone had tucked this away in a box instead of throwing it out. On the back, in blue ink, was a note. "I'm done with this one," it read. "I'll write my own." No signature. She didn't need one. I pressed my thumb over the tape lines, feeling the ridges beneath the smooth. It hit me then, in a way it hadn't at the party, in a way it hadn't even in the lawyer's office drafting the trust. The cycle hadn't broken the night I walked back into that hall and made everybody look at me. It broke in 100 smaller choices after that. In the way I talked to a scared 10-year-old outside a church instead of using her as a pawn. In the way I rewrote the trust so it protected without owning. In the way Tisa signed even though her hands shook. In the way Elias said enough in front of people who'd only ever heard him agree. In the way Haley grew up with at least one adult saying, "What do you want?" instead of, "Here's what you owe us." Being the one who breaks the pattern isn't glamorous. There are no trophies for the nights you lie awake wondering if you did the right thing. No applause for the days you bite your tongue instead of controlling someone for their own good. No highlight reels for the sessions where you sit in a therapist's office and finally admit that the way you survived is not the way you want to love. It's not enough to just leave. If you don't pay attention, the things that hurt you most will slip into your hands and come out as protection. The voice that told you stay small, stay here, stay useful, gets sneaky. It starts saying, they need you. You know better. Just make the decisions for them so they don't get hurt like you did. You can build a whole life on the opposite side of the country and still carry your mother's rules in your mouth. The real work is catching yourself when you hear her tone in your own voice. It's realizing that protecting someone doesn't mean deciding for them. That giving a kid options is not the same as pushing them away. That love doesn't have to sound like, "After everything I've done for you." If you watched this all the way here, it probably isn't because you were bored. It's because some part of this story already knew your name. Maybe you're the one in your family who refuses to laugh at the same old cruel jokes. Maybe you're the first to say, "No, I'm not doing that," and feel everyone's eyes on you. Maybe you're the one who left and still wakes up at 3 in the morning wondering if you were wrong. You're not failing because you're tired. You're tired because you're doing work nobody did for you. You're building a bridge to a different kind of life with your bare hands, while the people behind you complain about the noise. Save this. Come back to it on the nights you feel crazy for wanting better than at least it wasn't worse. Listen to this again when somebody calls you selfish for not setting yourself on fire to keep them warm. You are not alone in this. Somewhere, someone else is sitting at a kitchen table with a letter in their hands, wondering if they're allowed to choose themselves. Somewhere, someone is staring at a bus timetable or a lease or a trust document, heart-pounding, knowing that signing it will change everything. And somewhere, a girl in a cap and gown is walking across a stage, scanning the crowd for the one person who told her she could be more than our little helper. When Haley crossed that stage, the sun hit her face just right. The hall was bigger than the one we grew up in, the banners different, but the echo in my chest was the same as the day I first opened my own letter. I stood in the back, out of the way. When she found me, she grinned and tapped the pocket over her heart, where the edge of a folded, taped piece of paper peeked out. Later, on a small balcony overlooking a city that wasn't ours, we sat with paper cups of coffee between our hands. No speeches. No grand declarations. Just two North women sharing quiet in a world neither of us had been expected to reach. No one in that moment was asking us to shrink. No one was talking about who we would take care of when they were old. We talked about her classes. About my latest project. About a little bakery she liked 2 blocks from campus that sold croissants bigger than her hand. Ordinary things. The opposite of being buried alive in a story you didn't choose. Sometimes, the biggest revenge you get on the people who tried to erase you is that you and the ones after you get to live lives so ordinary and self-directed, there's nothing left for them to control. Sometimes the loudest "I survived you" is a simple, quiet, happy day.